Do you think the pilot uses every control in the cockpit to fly or land the plane, or do they use specific ones in a specific order? Hi, and welcome to Take Control with Mastercam Multiaxis. I'm Brian Gleason. I'll be your presenter today, and we're going to talk about what is multi-axis, how do I start a multi-axis toolpath, and what is the unified toolpath. Get into our first one. What is a multi-axis? Multi-axis toolpath is a toolpath where you need to run the tool about one or more axes simultaneously, or run the tool about an axis off center line. So maybe a axis substitution toolpath where the tool can stay on center would work, but anytime you have to take that tool off center, you're not going to be able to do that, and you're going to need a multi-axis toolpath. How do I start a multi-axis toolpath? We start about thinking of how we want to control the tool. Multi-axis is all about control. We have our cut pattern control, the tool's cutting direction or the tool path, tool axis control, the orientation of the tool as it follows the cut pattern or what direction our tool is going to be pointing, tool tip control, geometry of the tool tip that is compensated to, or the drive or machining geometry, and then collision control, which will adjust the cut pattern or the tool axis to minimize gouges, and it can modify all the above controls. And for best results, we try to create the multi-axis toolpaths in this order. So we got a part here. We can give it a quick look. And I have some of our more common toolpaths that I see. First one is a parallel. If we look at that, it is running the toolpath in parallel lines. In this case, it is running parallel to the front surface. You can also run it parallel to a curve, parallel to a set angle. And what I like to think is, if I'm just getting into the multi-axis toolpaths, I try to compare it to something I do know. So we do have a raster toolpath, which is going to create a series of a constant step over at an angle across the 3D surface. So I kind of look at the parallel as the multi-axis raster. We also have a morph, and it is going to adjust the step over and morph it between two rails. Another toolpath that I kind of think that reminds me of is a 3D blend. I have two rails, and it will try to make an equal amount of step overs in between those two rails. A long curve is another popular one. So similar to the parallel, it creates a constant step over, but it's doing it along a curve, and it is running perpendicular to that curve. Another one I find is the flow 5 axis, which is just like a 3D flow line, but has ability of multi-axis. Looking at this one, I'm probably going to modify the heck out of this part. Let's look at the process of creating a multi-axis toolpath. So I'm going to make sure my insert is where I want it to be. Come up to our multi-axis gallery. I'm going to start off with a very common one, parallel. Again, it's kind of like a 3D raster. We'll use our 1/4-inch ball end mill. And what I might be skipping over is that is the first part of the control, our cut pattern control. When we are picking a cut pattern, that is the actual toolpath that we're picking. So I started off with the parallel. My cut pattern, I'm going to be parallel to surfaces. I will select the front surface. I need drive geometry. I'm going to pick these cream colored faces. Next, we need some tool axis control. skipped over that. That drive geometry, that is our tip control. Tool axis control, I'm going to stick with a 5-axis surface with tilt, ortho to the cut direction. So it means we're going to stay perpendicular to the cut direction. And I'm going to try to test this out, see what it looks like without the collision control first. Over here on the upper left of my parameters, I have a preview page, and I can see that we have a pretty good looking toolpath, but I know I'm going to have some clearance issues. So this is when I will start adding in the collision checking. Allow it to tilt the tool. I'm going to use automatic, and we're going to add some avoidance geometries. Now I like this little feature of N+, so I can grab those faces without having to worry about grabbing extra. So I'm going to have it make sure that it tilts the tool and avoids all of those. So we're not trimming out the toolpath, we're just going to tilt the tool. I'll generate that toolpath. Looks pretty good. I can see, yeah, tool sticking way out there, but I still have some tilt I would have to do. Awesome. What if I didn't like that cut pattern? And maybe I liked the looks of the morph better, right? Well, I would have to go repeat the process. So I'd go pick my cut pattern, morph, pick my geometries that I want to drive the tool across, pick my drive geometries, pick my rails, pick my tool collision, and if I wanted to test another cut pattern, I would have to repeat the process again, and I would have 3-4 toolpaths trying to figure out which one I liked best. Let's look at another option. We have the new Unified Toolpath. So inside of our multi-axis gallery, we have Unified. And if we read it, it creates a toolpath using curves, surfaces, and geometry cut pattern to match. So we can basically do everything that the parallel, morph, along curve, and even the flow 5-axis do all in one toolpath. Let's make this one look just like our parallel. So I'm in the Unified, got our 1/4-inch ball. Cut pattern. The cut pattern page looks a little different. We have all sorts of options in here. I can pick my machining geometries first if I want to. And tool axis control is good. Collision control, I'm going to leave off for this sec. Go skip back up to the cut pattern page. Without even selecting a cut pattern, it's already going to guess and figure out which one I want to use. Well, it's going to guess which one it thinks best matches that surface. So I do want to use a parallel style toolpath, and I want it to be parallel to the surface. So on the cut pattern page, I'm going to add a surface row. I can come in, select the surface that I would like to be patterning to, and on that surface, I'm going to tell it I want to be parallel to. We can preview that, and we start looking similar to our parallel toolpath. Change a couple other options inside here. Tool axis control is still going to be surface with tilt, ortho 0, 0. Collision control, I know which ones I wanted to use from the previous toolpaths, so I'm going to do the same. I'm going to check flute, shoulder, shank, and the holder. Our strategy is going to be tilt, automatic. I don't want to go against my machining geometries. I'm going to go against my avoidance geometries. We'll go add those now. We'll go to front view. Again, I'm going to use that N plus. Nice little selection option. Just check some things right quick on my linking. I'll say okay. And if I compare my first parallel compared to my unified, they're going to look pretty much the same. Now, maybe I want to do a morph. Well, instead of having to go create a whole nother toolpath, I can come modify my unified toolpath. I'm going to open up the parameters. I'll go to my cut pattern page. I'm going to clear out my cut pattern, so I'll remove all rows. I'm going to add 2 guide rows. First one, I'll go select my curved geometry. I'm going to do linked edges, and we'll say next, next, next. Change direction. And we'll get around one edge of the cream colored faces. I will go to my next curve row. I will chain across the opposite side, just similar to like what we would do with a blend toolpath. On the style that I'm going to use those curves for, I'm going to drop it down and hit morph. I'll say okay, let that generate, and what I should get is something that looks almost identical, if not identical, to my other morph toolpath. So I have the option to only select display toolpaths. So there's my parallel. If I select this first morph and then the unified, I don't think you'd be able to see a difference from there at all. Let's look at our next common toolpath, a long curve. If I wanted to duplicate that one, I can just go into my Unified Multiaxis, go to the parameters. I'm going to clear out all rows. I'm going to add a curve row. We will use a curve. I'll need to select that curve. I'm going to wireframe chaining. And I just kind of drew a diagonal line across. Still using the same machining geometry. And looks pretty similar to our long curve. I'd have to just modify a couple other. We're still getting the cut pattern. And I would just have to change my, I would have to change it to tell it I want to be perpendicular and not use it as a guide curve. Just miss that drop down. There we go. Pretty much identical. Let's look at something that's a little bit of an enhancement. Our flow 5 axis. If you go into our parameters to the collision control page, I don't have a lot of options. I can't tell it how I want it to react when there is a collision to another part of the body. If I wanted to duplicate that toolpath with the unified, I'll go into the parameters of my unified. I'll clear out the rows. I'll add a surface row. I will select the cream colored faces. And I'm going to do a flow line U. So we can do a flow line toolpath, but now we have the added benefit of being able to tilt the tool automatic when it's going to collide with one of the walls that we don't want to hit. Let that generate. And I think that looks much better than this flow line. Hopefully you guys like it too. But wait, there's more. Inside of the cut patterns, beyond just being able to duplicate what we have for the common toolpaths, I'm just going to clear out. We have some automatic toolpaths. So I can do machining boundary parallel, preview that. And we get nice kind of a, what reminds me of like an equal scallop toolpath as it works its way from the center, morphing it out to the boundary. We can do a machining boundary morph, preview that. It's going to look, again, pretty similar, morphing its way out, starting in kind of a spiral shape, working its way out to the boundary. We also can do a center parallel. I mean, there's lots of options in there. A center morph. So definitely some cool options. Let's look at doing a center parallel. But what we'd end up having is probably some little scallops around these, or a little extra height on the scallops on around the profile shape of those cream faces. We have an option. So we can go to create an additional cut from containment. So that means it will run around. I'm going to make sure I define the shape of that contour I want it to follow. So I'm going to go into edges. We'll do linked edges. And nope, back that up. Change direction, shift next. Back up one. Change directions. I'll change direction again. Next, shift next. Where are we? Oh, back up one. Change direction. Change direction. Awesome. So now I'm going to run the tool on center. I'll let that generate. And what we'll get is it's going to trace the profile of that toolpath, or I should say those faces, and then get into then it will work its way around into the actual surfacing of those cream faces. So we kind of got like a pencil trace built in. Now, if we wanted to reverse those a little bit, we got plenty of advanced options. Oh, let's see, I think it was in our roughing. We can just reverse the order. So we should start in the center now. Oh, that's too far. Start off in the center. Work our way around, and then it will come back and trace the profile. So I guess what I'm getting to is Unified is a very, very powerful toolpath that you can be able to adjust your cut pattern on the fly and not have to go run through all the other options of the control, like our tool axis control, our tip control, where we're controlling the cut pattern or the drive geometry, or even back into our collision control. So we're able to change on the fly. We have a lot more options than just what we get from the drop down on the cut patterns or the multi-axis toolpaths. And if we want to go a little bit further, let's make sure I got everything set up correctly. We have our posts. external post. Awesome. We'll run through a little bit of simulation on that toolpath. Let's see what we actually end up looking like. Makes me feel good that I know I'm not going to crash into the platter or any of those edges. So it looks like we set up our tool axis control and our collision control pretty well. So definitely like using the full machine simulation to double check my toolpath. So with that being said, we have all these different controls. Knowing which ones to use in the right order, we're going to be able to easily control our multi-axis toolpaths. With the new unified toolpath, we're able to adjust a cut pattern on the fly, and it's probably the one I'm going to utilize the most from moving on forward with Mastercam 2022. Another thing I see is we'll hit too many buttons all at once and kind of lose track of where we're at. I'll sometimes just go restore from default and then start my tool axis control, my drive surfaces, and everything over again from the start, and pay attention to what variables I'm actually changing. So hopefully you guys found this informative, and let us know if you have any questions.